Hello, I'm Cheryl Wiens. I'm a teacher consultant with the Arizona Geographic Alliance. I'm here today to share with you a lesson that was written for the Teaching Foundations Project. The title of the lesson is Flooding, How Uncle Sam Can Help. Sheila Nice, another teacher consultant with the Arizona Geographic Alliance, and I co-authored this lesson together. We wrote it for grade 5, and it would take approximately 2 class sessions. It basically deals with having the kids learn the process of how a bill becomes a law, and after they learn that process, they apply their knowledge to suggest federal legislation to alleviate the impact of flooding. They're going to be doing some reading of a reader's theater piece and also some reading of a selection that we co-authored about the impact of flooding on the human and natural environment. There's also a writing component in the lesson. It therefore aligns with the ELA Common Core standards for writing. For 5th grade, write informative, explanatory text to examine a topic and convey ideas and information clearly, and also the ELA standard of production and distribution of writing to produce clear and coherent writing in which the development and organization are appropriate to task, purpose, and audience. Okay, our overview of the lesson is that in every region of the country, people deal from time to time with natural disasters, such as floods, hurricanes, and we couldn't ignore the point about temperature extremes here in the desert, although this lesson does focus exclusively on flooding. And then to integrate it in with the civics strand and the civics PO, students are going to be looking at how the federal government can help people in times of disaster when they create laws. The purpose of this lesson is that students learn the impact of natural disasters on the human environment. They, of course, learn the process by which a bill becomes a federal law. And once they've understood that process of how a bill becomes a federal law, they use their knowledge of how Congress passes new laws to propose a bill that would assist in lessening the human and environmental impact of flooding. There's a list of our materials. I'm not going to go through all of them one by one, but basically we have written a reader's theater script that will be used in a lesson. We have a flow chart that's used, and we have a student writing assignment after they have done the student reading about how floods can affect humans and their environments. Our objectives are that, of course, students will be able to sequence events. They will identify the congressional process by which a bill becomes a law, and they will explain how a natural disaster, and we're going to focus exclusively on flooding, how it can affect humans and their environment. Okay, let's get into the procedures. Prerequisite knowledge is necessary for this lesson. This is not an introduction to the 3 branches of our national government. Students learn that in 3rd grade. However, prior to this, students may not have had much knowledge or much learning about how our checks and balance system works, because this is going to be a big part of this lesson, and so you may want to make sure that they do have some prior knowledge that our 3 branches of government were formed so that we do have a checks and balance system. In session 1, first session, we suggest that you would watch a video from Schoolhouse Rock. It's called How a Bill Becomes a Law, and it's on YouTube, and if your school does not have YouTube, we also found it on TeacherTube, so you should be able to show it in your classroom. It's a really engaging video that has a real sad sack rolled up piece of paper called Bill. And his song that he sings is about the process that he goes through as he makes his way up congressional, the hill of Congress, and how it is very, very difficult for him to become a law. And he repeats several times, it's not easy being a bill. And he goes, of course, through the process in one of the houses, and then, of course, through the other house of Congress. To become a law eventually. If you are interested in having your students sing along with it as they watch the video, the lyrics can be found at this website. The Schoolhouse Rock website has the lyrics. All right, so as I said earlier, you want to make sure before you get into the lesson that students do understand and that they have a working knowledge that we do have the 3 branches of government, and those 3 branches were put in place to provide for the checks and balance system. After you're sure that they understand this, then go ahead and distribute the student copies of the Reader's Theater script, How a Bill Becomes a Law. Sheila and I wrote the script for this lesson, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the value of using Reader's Theater in the social studies content area classroom. The Reader's Theater is really very, very good for increasing student fluency in reading. So it's oftentimes used in reading class, and oftentimes the scripts are written for student literature based on children's books or on classical literature. There are lots of resources out there for the various Reader's Theater scripts that incorporate children's literature. There are also lots of resources out there for how you can write your own Reader's Theater script to use in the content area classroom. And by out there, I mean online. You can find resources that will help you put together your own Reader's Theater script. In the content area classroom, Reader's Theater is really very valuable. It's very effective because in Reader's Theater, students don't memorize, but they repeat and rehearse many times their script. And in that rehearsal, of course, they are learning the content knowledge, the content information. Reader's Theater is also engaging. Reader's Theater can be as theatrical as you would like it to be. Reader's Theater can be with props. It can be with different voices, different accents. Students can be as demonstrative and dramatic as they would like to be, or it can be as simple as reading their part when it's their turn. So you can see that Reader's Theater does lend itself for an engaging activity. Reader's Theater is also very good for support for your ELL students and for your struggling readers. You can adapt and modify according to the strengths and needs of your individual class based on whether you have struggling readers, whether you might give them a long part or a short part. You might want to have your ELLs paired up with a strong reader. And you'll see here in my script here in just a minute in my Reader's Theater that there are places for partner reading so that you do offer support for your struggling reader or for your ELL student. Reader's Theater also is engaging because it does involve kids, can involve kids kinesthetically. They can move around during the script if you want to incorporate some movement as well. So I hope you see that Reader's Theater is a really valuable tool that you can use not only in the language arts class, but also in the social studies content class. So when you distribute your scripts to the students, one of the powerful things about the Reader's Theater with the content is that you go over the script together for pronunciation and also for the content and also for vocabulary so that students are familiar with that before they even start to rehearse. With this particular script, I would make sure that they understand, of course, some of the content vocabulary, but also to review that we use the common noun house with the lowercase, and it's also used to describe one of the houses of Congress. So hand out the script, How a Bill Becomes a Law, to the students. Go over it with them so that they can pronounce all the words, they understand all the vocabulary, and then assign the parts. We wrote this script for 6 individual voices, but according to your strengths and needs in your classroom, you can adapt that any way that you see fit. There's also a component for the whole group to respond. So I thought I would share with you just about a third of the script. The script is about 1.5 pages, just so you can get a little bit of a flavor of how the script works and what the content is in the script. So I'm starting about halfway down, and it starts with the whole group saying together, "Before a law is a law, it's a bill. It's not easy being a bill." And voice 6 says, that's right, it's not easy being a bill because there are many steps in the process before a bill becomes a law. Voice 5 says, to begin, a representative introduces his bill to the House. Voice 6 says, and a senator introduces his bill to the Senate. Voice 4, and then there's a vote, right? Voice 1, not yet. You introduce your bill to the Chamber of Congress and the process begins. Voice 2, you tell your Chamber of Congress why you think your idea is a good one and why your bill should become a law. For example, you might propose a law to help citizens recover after a natural disaster, such as severe flooding. After all parts of the country deal with flooding. And here's a partner read, voices 5 and 6. Then because your bill is so wonderful and everyone loves it, the senators or representatives will immediately vote to make it a law. Voice 2, not exactly. And the whole group responds, not exactly? Voice 4, well, why not? Whole group, yeah, why not? Voice 1, there are many steps along the way before your bill is voted on. First, the law is given a number such as HR 123 or S123. The whole group says, a number. Voice 1, and then given to a committee, and if they vote yes, the bill goes to a vote in the Chamber of Congress where the bill started. Voice 6, after the committee says they like it and they send it to the entire chamber, then the Chamber of Congress votes and the bill is finally a law, correct? Voice 1, no, remember, it's not easy to become a bill. It's not easy being a bill, Even when your Chamber of Congress votes in favor of the bill, it is still not a law. And then it goes on through the rest of the process. All right, after your students have practiced and had plenty of rehearsal, then you can present it however you'd like to do it. You can present it to another class, whatever works for you. You may have already divided the class into half, one half doing Reader's Theater, the other half doing Reader's Theater. They present to each other orally. All right, so after they have done the Reader's Theater, then you're going to give students the flow chart for some guided practice to reinforce the information about the process of how a bill becomes a law. We've included in the lesson a blank flow chart that looks like this. So what you will need to do is project it somehow through your smartboard or on an overhead projector, and you're going to use your blank one, and then students are going to fill it in as you model how the process works. And of course, we've included the key, and the key looks like this. It's a simplified version of how a bill becomes a law, because remember the PO was that students have to identify the process, and so we have it so that it's pretty obvious that the process is the same in the House and in the Senate. The idea is introduced for a bill, the bill is given a number, the bill is sent to a committee to study, the committee approves it, the bill is presented on the floor of the chamber, and then it's voted on approved. And then, of course, it does have to go through the other House of Congress as well, and then it goes to the Joint Conference Committee where finally it's adopted by both houses of Congress. Afterwards, and of course, it is sent to the President. The President reviews the bill, and it still doesn't become a law until he does the side that we hope that he would do for your law, that he approves the bill and he signs it, and then it's become a law. If he doesn't like the bill, then of course he vetoes it, and then Congress, of course, can override the veto, beginning the process again, going through both houses of Congress. All right, the closure then, after students have filled out their flow chart, the closure for session 1 is a multiple choice quiz, which we've included in the lesson. Simple 6-question multiple choice quiz, which I won't go over right now, and we also have the answer key for you, so it's all there provided in the lesson. And at the end of the first session, then you would remind students that they're going to need their flowcharts tomorrow in the next session of class, because now they're going to apply their knowledge about how a bill becomes a law to information they're going to learn about a natural disaster. All right, so session 2, the next day probably, you are going to hand out to students the reading that Sheila and I put together called Floods Can Affect Humans and Their Environments. It's a very short reading, as you can see. It's only about a half a page, written on a 5th grade reading level. So you could, of course, use this in a variety of different ways. You could do partner reading, you could read it together, they could do silent reading. However works best with your class, depending upon the nature of your readers and whether you have ELLs. But it is a very short reading, and it does have the content about how floods, that natural disaster, affect humans and their environment. After students have read this short reading piece, then we ask that you brainstorm as a class on chart paper or on the smartboard some of the negative impacts of flooding. And after students have brainstormed about the negative impacts of flooding, then brainstorm about ways that government can help. And for example, with 5th graders, I would think that maybe if you brainstorm with them about the negative impacts of flooding, they would come up with things like people can die, it ruins farmlands and crops, contaminates water supplies, there's a loss of homes both from people and animals, it ruins property, ruins cars, it ruins family photos, and so forth. Could give a temporary loss of the roads, might flood out bridges, and that might be more than just temporary. There's a destruction not only of homes but of businesses. There might be a loss of services such as electricity. And speaking or going back to the idea about the road use too, there could be flash floods that if you're on the road you could be swept away, yourself or you in your car. After you've brainstormed these negative impacts of flooding, then I would review the flow chart from session 1 with students. Review that process of how a bill becomes a law, and then pose the question to students about how can the federal government help with the negative impacts of flooding to the human and to the natural environment. So you reviewed the flow chart of how the process works. Then you might brainstorm then before you give them the writing assignment about ways that the government can help, the federal government can help with flooding to lessen the impact on the human environment. Possible federal laws that a 5th grade student might come up with they might be concerned with, well, maybe we need to regulate how houses are built and how other buildings are built, how businesses are built. Now, of course, realizing that the federal government already has probably a plethora of laws that regulate all of this, but we want students to come up with their own ideas of what might be something that the federal government can do to regulate this. They might come up with, 5th grade students might come up with something about how we might need to deal with the construction of bridges and have laws that regulate that. We might need to have some laws that regulate where houses are built. Can you build in a floodplain? So students might think about that. They might come up with, do we need to have any kind of laws about preparedness for the local, city, state, and federal government? What's going to happen after the fact? Not only getting ready for it, but should we be ready for things that happen after the fact? Right, then give students the writing assignment, which is on the bottom of the reading piece. And the writing assignment is, you are a congressperson and you are concerned about the flooding problem in the United States. You want to get a bill introduced into Congress. So we ask students to write an essay, a minimum of 3 paragraphs, in which they explain the bill that they propose to help the people of the United States with flooding. And we have put together a rubric as well for grading their writing assignment, and that's included in the lesson. It's based on the 6 traits, and the assignment traits that we suggest that you would grade their writing assignment on are accuracy. In other words, how correct is the information they've included about flooding? Is it fully supported by the reading and what you've talked about in class? We would evaluate the organization and the focus. Did you stay assigned to the format? Did you state your case? And so forth. And we would evaluate conventions. The traits be evaluated then on a 5-point scale. and I'll talk about the assessment here. Okay, so our assessment for the assignment or for the lesson generally is, of course, the first assessment is the multiple choice quiz where we're assessing their knowledge of how a bill becomes a law. And this writing assignment then is assessed on this rubric, and we would consider that mastery would be 16 points higher on the rubric. Extensions for this lesson. There's a really great website. If you're not familiar with it yet, you should become familiar with it. It's icivics.org. And on icivics.org, there is a section on how a bill becomes a law. Some of the information for the Reader's Theater came from that. I would suggest, though, that your students would really gain a lot more from watching the videos, too, on the iCivics website about how a bill becomes a law. Be interesting to see if you do live in a floodplain, if students do live in a floodplain, and we found a website that has that information, and that's included here in the lesson. And even though it's not a federal law, you know that Arizona does have a Stupid Motorist Act, which might be fun to look at, where, of course, there is a liability of drivers who enter a flooded public street that get stranded. They are then liable for the costs of the rescue if that area has been barricaded and they go ahead and go through that area. So students might enjoy learning about Arizona's Stupid Motorist Act. And there's our sources for the lesson. And now that I'm bringing it to a close, I hope you see that our lesson did meet its purpose, that students did learn the impact of natural disasters on the human environment, and we aligned that and integrated it with the process by which a bill becomes a federal law. And after the students learned about that process, then they did propose a bill to assist in lessening the human and environmental impact of flooding. Thank you.